What's going on, construction crew? Trilled here with a tutorial. That's right, a tutorial. Today's video is the start of a series I'll be doing that will cover various aspects of Cities Skylines gameplay. Throughout my time playing and streaming Cities Skylines, I've had many people ask a myriad of questions from a beginner player perspective as to why their city won't do something. One of the most asked questions I've received is how to keep an industrial workforce present as your city gets bigger. So I decided to do a video about creating and maintaining your industrial workforce and how to build up your town correctly to help with this type of issue in the future of your city. But before we begin, here's the little information on how the game works. By default in the game, just like in real life, Sims will want to earn the best education that they can. Having that best education obviously leads to better paying jobs at high-end commercial and office locations, and that money that they bring in from those high-paying jobs equals a better quality of living. This allows them to buy homes in better areas that have higher land value. These higher land values happen because that area that they're moving into tends to have more parks, more educational opportunities, and an all-around better serviceable amenities. Things like police, fire, schools, parks, just all sorts of things that they want but don't necessarily need to have from a perspective of living. When all these serviceable amenities come together, the industrial workforce can decline as a result. People are leaving the industrial jobs for these high-paying jobs and for an education. If this happens, your entire city can fall, as goods are not made at the factories, which prevents them from shipping to the commercial, and the commercial can't stock the shelves and therefore make an income. These commercial shut down, which causes jobs to be lost, and finally people cannot afford to live in the city, so they move out and the entire city begins to collapse. However, to prevent all of this, there are some small, almost unnoticeable things that you can do in your city to easily prevent this debacle from taking place and to easily have a workforce for both low-income industrial jobs and the high-end commercial and office jobs that are available when your city grows bigger. I will cover what I believe to be one of the best ways of creating and maintaining the industrial workforce as your city grows. So without further ado, let's get building. All of these factories, they need workers. They don't have enough. And what's going to happen is if they continue to go without these workers that they desperately need, the building will become abandoned. And once all of that happens, it's the start of that debacle that I mentioned. But before we can fix it, we need to know a few key things about beginning our new city so that we can preemptively stop this from happening even at the first stage of our new little town. So when starting a new city, when you create a subdivision like here, you don't want to go and add tons of high density residential zones. You don't want to add tons of high density commercial zones or offices. You want to stick primarily with the low density commercial zones and low density residential zones. Adding a few factory industrial zones like we have here is probably the best option. But inside of those little neighborhoods that you are creating, you really want to focus on what kind of serviceable amenities you have. Right now, the serviceable amenities that we have for healthcare and death care, for our healthcare, we only have a couple of clinics. For our death care, we only have a couple of crematoriums. For our fire, we only have one. And for our police, we only have a couple. And that's the same way for those four types across this entire residential area. We have several of these residential areas over here. This residential area, we're going to be getting to a little bit later in the video, but we're going to talk about it now for a second because something different with our schools. As you can see, we don't have any schools. No elementary, no high school, no college, no university, no technical college, nothing. There is no education anywhere in any of these residential areas. In this side, we only have 3 elementary schools. I'll get to why here in a little bit. We've only put these few amenities in these areas because we want this area, all of these residential areas, to become our low-income residential areas. These areas will be the steady supply for the industrial workforce as our city begins to grow bigger. And As your city starts to grow, at the very beginning, you're probably going to see that your different types of workers that the building needs are going to be vastly different compared to later on in your city's growth. At the very beginning of a city build, when you have your industrial area, you're typically only going to see factories that require the uneducated workers. As your city starts to receive some form of education, you'll start seeing the different types of education popping up. For this building that we have highlighted, they have graduated past needing the uneducated workers, and now they're just needing educated and a couple of well-educated. The breakdown for these 4 tiers of workers, and this is kind of the rule of thumb. For uneducated workers, it's typically no schooling or just elementary schooling. For educated, it's some high school and graduation of high school. Well-educated is some college, and highly educated is graduating college and universities. That's how the breakdown of the game typically is. There's a little bit of wiggle room for all of that. At some point, the factories may have need for these higher educated and well-educated or highly educated workers, but luckily they will need a very small amount. For the highly educated, it's usually between 2 and 4 of those type of workers, usually reserved for like the CEO and things like that. The city, luckily, will usually handle this pretty easily on its own. If there is also an area of high income residential areas somewhere around the vicinity of that building that's asking for that type, and that's where this residential area that we have over here will come into play in a little bit. Right now, our city's industrial workforce is lacking. We want the factories to continue to perform, so let's bring the industrial workforce back up. To do this, once we've created our low-income area in the works with the serviceable amenities and the few of them, we're going to go ahead and grab a region. We're going to paint it just around the residential area. In my case, I have a massive residential area with only a couple of commercial areas intermingling with it. Once you have it, you're going to click on policies, and you're going to go ahead and find a whole bunch of different services and city planning options. So let's focus on these real quick. We have power usage, water usage, smoke detector distribution, recycling, and down here we also have recycled plastic. For city planning, we only have 2 right now, and that's the encourage biking and lightning rods because that helps prevent fire to an extent. But the one particular policy that we really want to focus on right now is this one right here called Schools Out. As you can see, I've already checked it. What it does is it says the citizens will prefer working over education, and only a small portion of the eligible cities inside this region will go to study in the university. While not everybody from this area will go to work in your industrial area, the majority will. And that's what we want to happen for our low-income areas. So we've highlighted it, we've checked it. We are now ready to go ahead and have them start working over there. And we're going to do the same thing with the Washington Square area up here. We're going to see if it's been checked. It is not, so let's check that. And we're going to go ahead and press play, and we're going to see what happens. over time, a majority of the factories, not all of them, but a majority of the factories have successfully found their employees, and this ebbs and flows. So you're going to see some pop up as others go away. But for the most part, we have really reduced it, and it looks pretty good. There's only a couple places, and that's probably because of all this traffic that's backing up over here. But I'm happy with that. That looks great for the first time doing this in this particular city. As we start to develop this area a little bit more for the low income, we should see even a better turnout for the rest of those regions. So there is one other trick of the trade that you can do. In this area over here, we have a region, Lake Hills, that we've created. And with this particular area, we can go ahead and try a different policy underneath that list. Now, this particular policy is usually reserved for when your city is much bigger and very bustling, and you have a bunch of high-end commercial, high-end residential, and you've kind of outgrown the lack of education in the city from a starting point. The policy we're going to be looking at is Industry 4.0. This particular policy adds new technologies that alter the nature of the industrial workforce. The industrial workforce becomes mainly consisting of well-educated and highly educated citizens, which is a huge bonus once you have a lot of schools and universities and colleges and, you know, great areas to live in with, you know, high-end jobs and stuff like that. The downside is once you click that one, your entire low-income population may try to get up out of there because all of a sudden there's no jobs for them. I typically only do this particular policy when I have a big bustling city. Doing it right now in this particular city would be a bad news bear situation. So you want to do it once you've had a really good start to your city, and now you're at the point where you've got some high-rise buildings, you've got some high-density commercial, you've got some office buildings, you know, that people are demanding. That's kind of when you want to do it. And there we go. There's everything you need to know about how to create and maintain your industrial workforce. One last thing you should know, depending on how far the industrial area is from the low-income residential areas that you're making, this could also influence how many people from that low-income region go to work. So keep those areas slightly close to one another for maximum residential workforce. And again, while not everybody's going to go from the schools out policy to the workforce area, the closer it is, easier it's going to be. This is why we have these residences and the residences above the industrial area have access to that area so easily. Well, construction crew, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope this helps. And please drop a comment if you want to see how something else regarding City Skylines is done, and I'll go ahead and make a video of it. And as always, you can find me live streaming City Skylines on Twitch. My name is Trilled, and I'll see you in the next video. Deuces.